Welcome to episode 38 of the Wake Up Podcast. And I have my good friend with me here, Max Hillebrand, who works at Wasabi. That's my pathetic attempt at a German fucking pronunciation of a surname. Free software entrepreneur. We've met a couple times now, and he's someone who I think has been a radical Bitcoiner in every sense of the word for quite a while. And yeah, man, pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, dude, Alex, man, thanks very much for letting me on the show because, funnily enough, I didn't get the Wake Up podcast up until somewhat recently, a couple months ago. And then I stumbled upon your archive and was like, well, damn, everything is interesting. And then I listened to pretty much everything by now. And seriously, man, you're rocking it. You're one of the podcast hosts who doesn't give a shit and who speaks truth as it is. And that's very rare and very much appreciated. So always great questions and great insights.
I appreciate that, man. I'm surprised they haven't locked me up yet and put me in one of Creedy's black bags.
Oh, dude, V for Vendetta is a predictive documentary of the years 2020 and following. It's scary, man. It's spot on. Every single thing.
It is. It's literally step by step, man. It's fucking wild to watch. And how close it is to reality today. It's just eerie. I can't. It's funny in the description on my podcast, I think it says, the world is largely asleep, blah, 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 blah. And I talk about what we talk about. Sort of, this is a podcast about, philosophy and psychology and Bitcoin anthropology and all this sort of principles and concepts. But at the end of it, the final paragraph says something along the lines of, the point of this podcast is to wake people up so that works like V for Vendetta don't become documentaries and stay in the realm of fiction. That's actually in the description on my thing. But
I didn't read that, but it's spot on.
There you go. Unfortunately, everyone's asleep, so no one's waking up. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
The goddamn V for Vendetta is becoming real.
Yeah. But your title of the podcast really, hits to the point. That's mainly the reason. Wokeness has kind of been misdrued with a lot of this green hippie mindset. But I mean, to be awake, right? To live, to act, to be a human is all fundamentally entwined. And so yeah, if you don't wake up, well, you're not really a human in that sense.
Man, I made an analogy actually, and we're sort of going off on a tangent here, but let's just go. I made an analogy as a tweet storm, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I said, Hollywood's been making zombie apocalypse movies for, decades now. And, it was almost, their zombie apocalypse stuff was right. Except the real world zombie apocalypse that we got is like a pathetic version of it, So we've got mindless idiots running around. They're suffering from a virus of called stupidity, and conformity. They're mindlessly sucking the brains out of everybody else around them. So everybody else puts on their stupid mask and conforms and listens. So it's like we're literally living in the zombie apocalypse. It's like we're surrounded by mindlessness. We're surrounded by stupidity. It's fucking spreading. But it's not as bloody and violent as Hollywood portrayed. It's just strange.
Yeah, right. Zombies are basically unproductive people who don't think for themselves and who don't act and who don't build anything, but just destroy and consume. Right? Well, welcome to the 20th and 21st century society where almost nothing productive has been built and just have been leeching off the wealth of others, and somewhat, well, surviving as a species, but for sure not thriving. Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, we've got this sort of capital base that has been built up over millennia through trial and error, through the desire of human beings to innovate, through the productive capacity of individuals that have come together, and I mean that still obviously lives on, right? But the thing is that the parasitic nature of, modernity and modern zombies is one that, like you said, doesn't add to that productive capacity. It leeches from that. It sucks from that. It consumes it. And I think we've genuinely come to a place where the size of the parasite now is potentially too large for it to continue feeding on the remaining capital. Maybe not the remaining capital base, because there's quite a bit of a capital base left, but at least it's become too big to feed on the remaining humans that are left, that are not zombies, that are actually trying to build on that capital base. So we're actually now depleting things, and this doesn't have a pretty outcome at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's not just about depreciating the capital stock that is in existence, right? That is the scene, right? We see all the businesses closing down, right? And but there's a massive unseen part to this entire equation, right? And that is the lost opportunity that we would have had if we had the capital to invest, right? And to build something, right? So not just do we see the capital diminishing literally, we also see the opportunity cost of what could have been, right? Where we could have been now, what types of capital we could have accumulated, and the technologies that we could have refined and improved upon, right? And the wisdom that we would have left is unfortunately, well, gone. Like, this opportunity has been wasted over the last hundreds of years, and now it's the time to somewhat clean up, right? And to make sure that from the future we actually focus on what is important.
Yeah, you actually touched on two threads I want to pull there. Is that is a really good point. The idea of the lost opportunity, or the opportunity cost. And I was hanging out with this girl the other night, and she was young, I think 23, 24 or whatever, and she was just mentioning to me that, I asked her what were your plans for 2020, and it's interesting to see how younger people really, well, at least the cohort of younger people that I seem to have been meeting, against all of these stupid lockdowns and things like that, because they're fundamentally, it's not that it's just a couple of weeks, or turned into a whole year, but it's somebody who's 23 years old will never be 23 years old again, and will never get that year of their life back again. And imagine what that person could have done throughout that year, could have experienced, could have learned, could have created, could have thrived for. But that was sort of stolen from them by a group of moronic bureaucrats who couldn't tell their ass from their face. And when you multiply that across millions and billions of people, this has been a catastrophe. Like, particularly, like, I mean, we've seen multiple catastrophes along the way, but I think the last 12 months has been such an accelerated catastrophe in terms of lost opportunity and lost productivity and lost potential. I mean, and it's not to elevate the 23 and 24-year-olds. It's also, imagine being 82 years old, and you're in your last couple of years of life. You don't know if you're going to die this year, next year, or the year after, but you spend the last fucking year of your life locked up inside, afraid, by yourself, away from family. Like, what in the fuck did you live for the last 80 years to not be able to have a choice to say, hey, if I want to go out and venture out into this unknown area of, we're all going to die from a virus, well, fuck, I can choose to do that if I want. But no, we've stripped them. We've stripped everybody at every layer of society from the capacity to choose for themselves. And I think it's fucking disgusting. So,
yeah, absolutely, right. And it's devastating for those people who don't actually have that much of a life left, right? Who only have a couple days or years. And this is horrible. I mean, the dignity to die in peace with your family and your loved ones beside you is something like very human, right? And that is being taken away. Like I hear so many stories of old people being in some elderly home or hospital, and literally it being forbidden to get any visitors, right, on their deathbed. And even friends of mine broke into the property of the or of the senior home, and then stood outside on the window, right, just to knock and wave. And they made a picture of the grandpa sitting in there, just devastated, completely like broken, because he could not fathom why his family is not coming inside to greet him and to hug him and to be with him, right? Which is ridiculous. And then, well, sadly, he died just shortly after that, without having the comfort of his family and his loved ones. It's so anti-human, this entire thing.
I mean, humans are. It's funny. It's even in the words, right? Humans are social creatures. Like, what makes us different to all the other species is our capacity to be social, and to use that social element and our capacity to create, these abstractions in order to cooperate and things like that. We're literally crushing the heart of that social capacity for humanity by being socially distanced. It's like it's antisocial, like I said, it's anti-human. It's absolutely right? Anti-human.
And for how long did we have the tradition to invite strangers as guests under your roof and offer them salt and bread, right, and some water? Like, hey, I mean, like, the guest right and what that means is such a beautiful concept, right? To trust strangers and invite them into your home and care for them, right, and help them out. And that's literally illegal now. You can no longer invite strangers and offer them food because, well, you're a restaurant and fuck you. That's why. But it's tragic.
Fuck, tragic is the word, man. Jesus Christ. So, I guess it's such a. I don't know. It feels like I've obviously been bashing this topic on publicly in the podcast and privately, as I'm sure you have as well. And it's like it's as you said, it's tragic, it's devastating to see, and sort of what seems to make it worse is these people who act like they care, but want to see more of this isolation and separation and lockdowns and removing the capacity for you as an individual to choose sort of what you can do with your own body. And it's like it really is disappointing. Like, I think it's a disappointing time to be a human in that sense, but at the same time, what gives me hope and almost like the idiots sort of perpetrating this, whether intentionally or just through sheer stupidity, because I think a lot of it is just sheer stupidity. It's like people sort of caught by the virus of hysteria, just reacting out of fear and mindlessness as opposed to thinking through things. But what it's inadvertently doing is sort of separating the world into two broad classes, which is zombies and humans. And it feels like, to me, sort of the humans are all converging around things that are real. I know last time we caught up, a beautiful part of Europe, you guys were sort of doing stuff to make yourself more self-sufficient, and a lot of Bitcoiners doing stuff like that, and actually being human as opposed to being mindless zombies. And I think one of the things that's at the locus of this, which is obviously at the locus of your life, my life, this podcast, and all sorts of stuff, is Bitcoin. Because it, like, I mean, I quoted this in an article that I wrote, I think a couple months ago. Is, I call Bitcoin the renaissance of responsibility, and I think without responsibility, you can't have humanity. Like that's the very thing. Like the ability to be responsible as an individual, as a human, as a sovereign entity, is what makes you human, what makes you alive. So,
well, I mean, I think there's just no way that you can get out of responsibility. Like, your actions have consequences per the definition of what an action is, right? And you don't get around that. And every action that you make will have a consequence manifesting in this world, and it will affect you very much, right? Especially you, because you were the one causing the action. So Bitcoin, it's a renunciation of that fact and an embracement of it, right? To say, yes, it's my responsibility to choose in what monetary currency I want to get paid in. And well, I'm going to make a reasonable and a responsible choice, right, for something that will bring prosperity, not just to myself, right, which is obviously important, but also to all my peers in the network, right? And I mean, if you look at it from that light, just using fiat currencies, getting paid in fiat, is absolutely irresponsible, and you will have to live with the consequences. And what we see in 2020 are the consequences of hyperinflation, right? Tyrannical overstepment and fascist regimes. Voila, gets you every time. Print money, fascist dictators. Clockwork, right?
Yep.
So you will have to live with the responsibilities, with the consequences of choosing the euro. And well, by choosing Bitcoin, you do alleviate that bad karma to a great extent.
That's a good point. Have you read When Money Dies? Yeah, okay. I just finished it, and it's just so eerie to read that book now. I mean, I listened to it on audiobook, but same shit. And it's just, people sort of have this idea that Hitler just turned up one day, and it's like, well, no, that's not how it actually worked. Is that all of these shenanigans happened beforehand, which created it created a fertile ground for that kind of a person to rise up. And initially he was a fucking national hero because everything else was such a clusterfuck beforehand that people were begging for somebody with something solid to say, and they were looking for someone or something to blame. But because people don't, we've economics and just economics 101 has been brainwashed out of us, and just the not understanding the basics of how the theft that is inflation operates. People then go and blame that group in Jews. It's the gypsies, it's this people, and that's very visible to do so. So it's like we're doing that now, but now sort of the Jews are either white people or people who don't want to fucking wear a mask, or people who don't want to get jabbed with something that they don't need. It's like we're sort of the new class of these Jews, and I actually also think that Bitcoin is in some capacity, like for me, as I was listening to that book and thinking about those people who made good decisions during that inflationary period, and sort of managed to subsist some of to maintain some of their wealth and even get wealthier in that period, they got blamed for it when it wasn't them that created the problem. They just were intelligent enough to position themselves to be beneficiaries of the clusterfuck. And in a way, that's what Bitcoiners are today. Like, we are going to get disproportionately wealthy because we have put in the work to understand what Bitcoin is. And I fear that the new class of particularly the new class of like Jew, call it, will be Bitcoiners, and I think it's dangerous.
Oh yes, absolutely, right. The result of socialism is a great amount of envy and jealousy and pity, right? Not nice character traits, but they do manifest. Like, if the digma is everyone must be equal, right? And those who are more productive should give to those who are less productive, right? Well, if someone is very productive, then why hasn't he given his wealth away, right? Why is that guy thriving at my expense, right? I could be the one having a bit more comfortable life, just if he sacrifices it for the greater good, right? And absolutely, that will come to Bitcoiners, very, very much so. Especially, the early Bitcoiners, and I consider this right now still pretty much the early phase, right? Yeah, as you said, massive capital protection, right? Actual capital accumulation, right? You get more Bitcoins every day. Most people don't even have a single Satoshi yet, right? like this wealth discrepancy will continue at an exponential rate. And sure, for those in a Bitcoin mindset, that's awesome, right? As everyone accumulates more capital, we get to build more awesome shit in the future, right? That's great. But of course, if you have that fiat mindset, that communist mindset, where, oh, look at these guys thriving over here while I'm in the shit, right? Barely being able to afford some bread, right? Or some shitty soy burger, like it's gonna spite a lot of jealousy, and you're gonna have to deal with that, and especially protect yourself from all the zombies coming after your Bitcoin hoard.
Yeah, man, this shit's gonna get real. This is a beautiful segue into part of what I wanted to discuss today, which is sort of Bitcoin privacy, because that's one of the, I guess, if you look at the OODA loop, that's one of the tools that you use beforehand to protect yourself. But before we go in there, I actually want to talk a little bit about the breadcrumbs or the ingredients or the events or the things that helped prime you. Because I think, what are you now? Like sort of mid-20s roughly, yeah? Somewhere in that range?
Yeah, I think 24, but who's
Okay.
counting? Bodily age is so boring.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, look, for me, I thought you were much older, honestly, when we caught up. Like, I was like, fuck, this guy's, around my age. And I'm an old fart, so I'm almost 10 years older than you. So for me, I'm really curious what the breadcrumbs were for someone your age to have come to understand Bitcoin, but from the strong principles that you understand it, because there's a lot of young guys who are into Bitcoin, but they're sort of in it for the tech or in it for the trading, and they sort of don't get the raison d'etre. Like your personality and your I guess your stand on Bitcoin seems to align far more with people that are a little bit more of my generation, like me, Hoddle, fucking Francis, Safe. Like we're sort of that slightly older generation, born in the 80s, etc. That kind of have a foot in both worlds. So yeah, talk me through your journey, man, when you were younger and these ingredients.
Yeah.
I'm super curious.
Yeah, so like the person who probably mostly influenced that from an early age was, of course, my mom, and because she had somewhat intuitively, but not even like in your face articulated, but she had very anarchist principles and lived that. And lived the education based on that. It was always about, oh, do your own thing. If you want to do something, we'll go ahead and try, right? Like apply yourself and figure it out. But also combine that with the consequences, right? Like if you make a shitty choice, well, you're gonna have to deal with it and own it, right? And be there and fix it. And like one specific thing that comes in mind was just, I was never lacking any like food, nourishment, shelter, all the basic needs were very much covered, of course, by the family. But, all these extra luxury goods, like new toys, right? Fancy things that I wanted to buy, were something that I had to buy for myself, right? I had to somehow figure out how to get it, right? My parents weren't just going to gift it to me randomly just because I wanted it. And that was so important because I always had this, and I still do, that for the things that I really want, I have a very high time preference. Like I want them and I want them now, right? And this is something that if left unchecked, right, will ruin you. If you just buy every plastic crap that comes to your mind, you're going to be a poor bastard really quick, right? So like the way that my mom kind of made me realize this like that discrepancy was just, well, if you want something, earn some money and buy it for yourself, right? And all of a sudden it was not just, oh, I have this wishing fountain where I can just say I want to have the latest something and I'm going to get it magically. It's like, no, if I want it, I have to work for it, right? And actually be productive and help others, right? So from a very early age, I think 9 or something, 10, I started having jobs just to earn money, right? Then this interesting thing happened that all of a sudden I calculated like, oh, like it took me so long just to get that amount of money. Do I really want to spend it on this worthless piece of shit? Right? Like, do I really want to have it? Most often the answer was no. Like I worked my ass off for this. It took me forever. I'm not just going to waste that. It's like this good that I want to buy is not the best thing that I can do, right? There's something better that I can buy maybe in the future. right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this aspect of being productive, right, being an entrepreneur, helping others, and earning money for that with the intent to ultimately save it to do some cool things in the future. This was something that I just lived as a child, based on that free, earn it attitude.
Yeah, interesting. So I've got a saying that not many people know, but I mean, sorry, many people know, but not many people have heard me say. But I wrote it in like a really long piece, which is people say money is the root of all evil, which I think is just absolute stupidity. The root of all evil, I believe, is entitlement. Or I call it the coveting of someone else's shit, basically. So wanting someone else's crap, or wanting someone else's stuff, or wanting the product of someone else's labor. The idea of entitlement for something that you didn't have to earn, I actually think is genuinely the root of all evil. Like that's where everything falls apart. Now, I'd be curious to sort of hear your thoughts on that. But your thing that you just mentioned there is that the fact that you had to earn things built this foundation of, I guess, responsibility for you at a young age. And I think today we're just drowning in people who believe that they're entitled to someone else's shit. And like, I think that this is sort of one of the strongest arguments against democracy is democracy is a system which gives you permission to believe that you have the right to mandate or dictate or have a say in what somebody else should do with their stuff. And that's why I think democracy is such a fucking cancer. It's just some people call it a light form of communism, but I think it's actually a more insidious form because, communism collapses quickly, whereas democracy eats the heart out of the victim, which is society, over a much longer period of time, and then the thing catastrophically fails. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about entitlement and how that differentiates.
Yeah. I very much agree with you, but I would like to draw one nuance that I think is also down your alley. And that is that, seeing that someone else has cool stuff and being like, and thinking for yourself, oh, wow, that's awesome. Like that solves a problem that I have. I want to have that too, right? I want the same problem fixed, right? That aspect I think is very human. Right? Again, we're social creatures and we do interact with others and we perceive others, right? We see them manifest themselves and how they act, right? And I think there's nothing wrong with taking that inspiration, right, of someone else, taking the idea of someone else, right? Taking the technology that someone else is using, right? Or the approach, the methodology, right? And if it works for yourself, to apply that too, right? So if we're talking about non-scarce goods of information, right, here, absolutely copy your neighbor, right, as much as you want, especially if your neighbor is doing a good job at what he wants to do, right, then for sure, like copy him and figure it out if you can apply the same thing in your actions. Of course, where there is a hard line is when we're talking about scarce goods, right? It's goods that actually have a conflict, right? So like with an idea, right? If I want to wear a black t-shirt too, and I get that idea in my head, well, I will just put it on, and I didn't take the idea of wearing black shirts from Alex. But if we're talking about actually taking the black shirt, right, I rip it off Alex's body just because I want to have the exact same shirt that he has, all of a sudden we have a conflict, right?
Yes.
Who will use the scarce resources according to their own will, right? And because of that conflict, well, property rights come in to solve this conflict on a large scale, right? But again, it only comes in on scarce goods, not on the non-scarce goods of information.
Yeah, very, very good nuance. Yeah, so I guess that's a perfect bit of coloring because when I think about coveting someone else's stuff, my interpretation of that is to take somebody else's thing. But that's a very good delineation, is real scarce goods versus things that are idea or meta based or copyable or replicatable, because
a nice way to look at that distinction is a good that you can give to someone else without sacrificing the benefit of it for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's, for example, with the t-shirt, right? Either you wear it, but if you want to give me that t-shirt, right, then you have to sacrifice it and you run around naked, right? While with an idea, the words that I give you right now, sure, you have them and you benefit from them, right? But I don't give them up. Like the pieces of information that I just spoke, I don't suddenly forget, right? That's not how informations work. So there is no sacrifice for sharing. And therefore, well, why make it difficult to share if it's just free for everyone?
Interesting, and that makes everything better. Yeah. So that actually digs into the whole IP discussion, which I'm also sure you've got a strong position on. So I'm actually going to add that here to our notes because I think that is a brilliant area of discussion. But let's stick with the breadcrumbs thing. So having to be responsible, having to create your own things, and that sort of teaching you the value of delayed gratification and the value of savings effectively. Like, I think civilization is impossible without the capacity to save. And it's not, I think it's actually that's a fact. We can't move forward without actually building some sort of capital base. So other than that, what were some of the other later breadcrumbs for you? Like, was there, particular works or, books or ideas or things that inspired, that sort of helped plant the seeds for you?
Well, I think that other big seed is curiosity in general. And that is very much tied into my early entrepreneurial activity, right? Because, well, once I figured I want something and I got to work for it, then was like, well, how do I work most efficiently? Like, how do I not waste my time, basically, right? I was curious about entrepreneurship, right? How do I solve the problems for others profitably, so, well, that I gain from it and benefit long term? And they didn't teach that in school, right? Especially not like in basic schools, at young ages. So I was like, okay, well, if they're not going to teach me here, I have to look for that information somewhere else and try to figure it out, right? So I did go down the economics rabbit hole also at a very early age, just because, well, I wanted to discover it. And then here, funnily, of course, obviously, right? First, you read the mainstream, and you get the latest textbooks on macroeconomics and shit like this, right? And I try to read it and like listen to like videos and stuff like this, but it just, I was like, something is off. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I don't get it. But they're like, either I'm too stupid to understand it, or something is just really horribly off. And I could never really articulate what exactly it was, because what they wrote on paper made sense in the paper. Like, it was a well-articulated model, and the stuff inside the model, well, was working, yes. But I was like, this entire model doesn't make sense. Like, this does not solve the problems that I want to have for how can I, as an entrepreneur, be better. It doesn't say anything about that. And that's what led me down to more, well, fringe ideas in the economics field, until eventually discovering Mises through the Mises Institute, and Austrian economics and praxeology. And that influenced my thinking greatly, with like finding a methodology that was actually useful, right? Not just some Keynesian bullshit models about aggregates where I don't know what the aggregate consumer base is. I don't know. I deal with people. Right? And all of a sudden comes Mises and writes this beautiful piece called Human Action, where he builds, not just economic thought, but he builds an entire view of life, right? In one beautiful book that starts with the simple assumption, right? With like an unquestioned fact that, well, humans exist, right? Like, individuals are here, right? I, the individual, exist, and I do stuff, right? Like, I have problems. Mises says I live in times of uncertainty, right? And I'm in a state of uneasiness, right? There are things that I like that are bugging me, things that I would like to improve. I'm hungry, right? As simple as that. And then comes the beautiful thing, like that genius spark of the entrepreneur, right? Who lives in the state of suffering, but who has the genuine strive to find a solution, right? To imagine a better world where the problem no longer exists, right? And not just to imagine it and to think it, which in and of itself, that creativity is genius, right? But to act upon it, right? And to change his miserable ass right now in order to get to that point in the future that he thinks is better. Like, this is exactly how humans work, right? In so many aspects. And once you understand that methodological approach, right, to start with assumptions and then to build logically on top of them, right? And if you have good assumptions and good reasoning, you're going to get to some really insightful things. And because it's based on individuality, everything will be useful for you because, well, you are an individual, right?
Man, that brought chills down my spine then. It's like, so many people have said it in so many different ways. It's like, entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of industry and entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of the economy. But it's like entrepreneurship and the idea of creating something from nothing is the lifeblood of existence. That's what human beings are. We are creatures that solve problems. We are all entrepreneurs in some way, shape, or form. And that like human action lays out the case that we are all acting towards bettering our ends or bettering our circumstances in some way, shape, or form. We're all moving towards that. And the question of better is a subjective one, which is, what might be better for me might not be better for you. And if we can sort of come to terms with that, we can sort of, if we can, use empathy and understand different people, maybe what we can do is align what's better for us with others, and we create a solution to a problem that might ail multiple people, and that's the genesis of society. That's the genesis of everything. That's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And I like that it is based just on the individual. The entire thought is works if you look at the isolated individual, right? And that's beautiful. Like, it's like you solve problems for yourself, right? Obviously, but that's why you do anything, right? To solve problems for yourself, right? Some people might call that selfish. I call it human, right? But the beautiful thing is that this aspect of fixing the problems for yourself actually incentivizes you to work with others, right? Just alone for the fact that if you solve the problem for someone else, right, he's going to be better off, right? He has a problem that he now has dealt with, right? It's gone and he's in a better situation, which means he can in turn solve a problem for you, right? And can do it so like much more efficient, right? If you have smart peers around you, like people who thrive and to actually create something, right? Who fix problems, well, they're going to fix your problems too, right? At least some of them. And this is just a very, like, although it's fundamentally based in the individual, it's a very socially coherent and like very beautiful aspect.
It's funny, like, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, people call us the radicals. It's like, how dare you be so selfish to want to make things better? It's strange.
Yeah, right. And just that aspect of being radical. I mean, the assumption of the thought that we're laying out here is individuals exist, right? And they act. Their time exists, right? These are the two basic assumptions that we have. Individual exists, time exists. Now, let's look at it in like lights of communism, right? Or Keynesian economics. Same shit. Collectives exist, and there is no such thing as time, right? It's ridiculous. I mean, you see it in statements like, oh, national debt is just money that we owe to ourselves, right? So stupid. I mean, so stupid. Who is we and who is ourselves, right? Collective thinking, right? Individuals are nowhere near in that statement. This is just collectives act somehow. And when we take something from the right side of the pocket of the collective and we put it in the left side of the collective, it doesn't matter. It's still all in the collective. We're still all a jolly happy bunch, right? And further, right, debt has a timing aspect of it. It's not just money that you owe to yourself, even in that analogy. It's money that you yourself today owe to yourself in the future, right? That's what debt is about. And that is also completely neglected in this thought and in the entire Keynesian thinking. Like, interest rate has nothing to do with time. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you see that just this model is a myth. It's an absolute myth. Guess what? Collectives do not exist, right? And time does exist, right? The assumptions of the entire model are useless, completely ridiculous, right? Anything that you will build on top with such a mindset will be wrong, just flat out wrong.
So then that sort of brings me to where we are now then. So I think reality, we can't escape reality, right? So it's despite us building models which are completely devoid of any roots into reality. So like Keynesianism or communism, or these ideas that the collective exists and that time doesn't exist, etc. And these sorts of models are what bureaucrats and central bankers and everything try and adapt their rules or their mandates or their fiat decrees towards. But at the same time, because reality does exist, and because we as individuals live in the material world, we live amongst a set of resources that are scarce. We have a scarce amount of energy and time that we actually operate within that medium. We actually still build shit. We still do stuff. So it's like the force of human existence manifest in action is still strong enough to still build buildings and shit around me, right? Like so stuff still has risen. And that's sort of what I call the never-ending progress of natural capitalism. It's what we do. We're naturally solving problems. We're naturally creating. We're naturally building stuff. You have this sort of this parasitic manifestation of collectivism that just keeps eating on it, and the stronger the host, the more the parasite can feed. But where do you think we are now with how big the parasite has become, and how big this, how much the lie that's been told big enough, loud enough, and often enough has become this sort of almost a replacement for reality, and in doing so is destroying the reality that we've built for so long. Where do you think we are?
Yeah, I think you just really nicely articulated a unique viewpoint of the Austrian business cycle, because that's basically what this entire subject is about. Your action have consequences always, right? And the thing is, if your thoughts, if your understandings and your actions are not aligned, then you will not solve your problem, right? You will not achieve the thing that you want to achieve. Right. So what does that mean if the collective society has a collectivist's book, right? And its fundamental assumptions are completely off, right? That means they're absolutely lost and don't even know which problems to work on, first of all, right? And then even if they find a problem to work on, which as they are humans, after all, they will, right? Even collectivists act because they are individuals after all, right? So these people will try to solve problems, but they will work on the wrong problems and they will not actually achieve what they want to set out to achieve. Maybe a bit more specifically, in the Hayekian production triangle, we will reduce the capital invested in later production periods, right, in favor for shorter production periods. And this is basically a decrease of savings, right? You can only invest in long-term things if you have savings, right? So if, for example, via fiat inflation, through the collectivist mindset, the inflation kicks in and just some people print money at the expense of others, this means that all entrepreneurs invest their capital into shorter time periods, basically, as otherwise would have been. And this does manifest, right? All these accumulated wrong problems that are being worked on inefficiently are wasted capital, right? Sure, we build something, but it's not really the real problem that we want to solve, right? This is called the boom period, right? Where the malinvestment and the overconsumption kicks in, right? Entrepreneurs solve useless problems and customers don't even know what problems they want to have solved, right? These two things together create a boom period. Everyone is happy in that time, right? Where we just decrease our production rates and so on, because we still have capital to feed off, right? It's just one big party. Who cares about producing anything? We got enough to party the whole night long, right? Great, great. You're going to have a marvelous time in the boom period, right? But eventually the bust comes. And the bust, well, economically speaking, means everyone gets poorer. And what it means more fundamentally is that you realize that the problems you worked on in the past were not serious problems, and that you just wasted a bunch of time on a stupid quest that wasn't really useful to you. And even worse, right? A lot of problems have crept up that you should have dealt with like 10 years ago, but you did not, right? And these problems and your inaction towards these problems show their consequences now, right? And now, not just did you realize that you just waste a bunch of time solving wrong problems, all of a sudden, really hard problems come and you don't even know how to deal with them, right? And that is where poverty kicks in and the bust kicks in, right? And well, hopefully, right, smart entrepreneurs will take this kick in the ass and then figure out the real problems to work on and find efficient solutions to fix them, right? But if that does not happen, right, if the individual spirit and curiosity does not kick in, if the collective continues to just do its crazy things, well, the problems are just going to accumulate more and more for a longer time period, and they will just get bigger, and there will be no smart person left to actually fix them.
And we sort of spiral into fucking oblivion. Couple things I want to pull there. So the solving of stupid problems, or even the attempt to solve meaningful problems, but doing it in a poor fashion where you fuck things up and you make them worse than what they were in the first place. That's almost like a constant for existence, right? Is, we make mistakes. We're human. Like, we thought bleeding people out for a long time was a way to help them, heal. And, the amount of people we killed in that process, like, we don't want to know. So, so I guess what you're saying there, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the natural cycle of life, it has seasons. It has times when we're doing really well because the overwhelming, the majority of us are making good decisions, or even if it's not the majority of us, those making good decisions, it's adding so much value to society that it actually does create a boom period until people sort of either become soft or feel entitled or whatever, and then they start not. And this is sort of in the absence of, let's say, central banking and planning and all that sort of stuff. I'm just talking natural progression of humanities. We have good times, and there's the amount of value from good decisions exceeds or outweighs the loss from bad decisions, or bad actions. But at some point, maybe that sort of seesaws, and we have a small downturn. And then that downturn forces us to think deeper and cut out the things that we don't need, etc. And it's almost like it's corrective in nature. That's what it is. When you have to drink, you're going to have a hangover. So we have these sort of corrective moments, and that sort of focus us in on what is important. We cut the fat and we focus in, and then that sort of stems the downward trend, and it starts to come back up. And so that's sort of the natural progression. Whereas what happens with the made up economy that we're attempting to live by is we try and short circuit that by removing any corrective mechanism of realizing what problems are wrong or right, etc. And we try and inflate the good times, and in the process make the system really, really fragile, and actually create more of, we exacerbate that boom period where we're actually lost in terms of what problems are to be solved and what ones don't need to be solved, and create more and more bad action, but it's camouflaged by the creation of excessive money and the borrowing of future money through debt. So maybe have I articulated that well, and maybe talk me through? the differences
Yeah,
there.
yeah, no, I think you're onto something here. Like as you say, right? Humans are not perfect, right? We're suffering a bunch, and we don't even know what our problems are, and let alone how to fix them, right? We live in uneasiness, right? So, like, sure, like, hopefully you're gonna find out which problems you actually have, and sure, hopefully you're gonna find a solution to it, but it's very much not guaranteed, right? And you're gonna make a lot of mistakes on the way of trying to solve your problems. It's not gonna just magically work the first second you think about it, right? Especially any meaningful problem to solve, it's going to require a lot of thinking and acting. Um, so the question is, how do you deal with the failure, right? What happens if you try to solve a problem, but you just didn't succeed in fixing it? Like, what do you do, right? What is your reaction? Like, well, I guess there are two different ways of looking at it. I mean, either you take the responsibility yourself, right, and you're like, oh shit, I fucked up. Let me try again, right? I'm going to invest more of my time, more of my capital into trying to fix that problem. Well, hopefully it's going to work, right? Are you going to invest your own capital in order to try to fix the problem the next time, right? Well, that is freedom, right? That is sovereignty. That is individuality, right? The other approach would be to say, well, okay, I didn't make it this time. Fuck it, I'm too tired. I don't want to work on it anymore. Like, you do it for me now, right? You fix my mistakes. I don't care. And like trying to offload that to someone else, especially like forcefully and against that other person's will. I mean, there's nothing wrong with hiring other people to fix a problem for you, right? But you gotta respect them, right? And be honorable to them and honest, and not try to steal from them, right? But if your answer to failure is to force others to take the failure upon them, right, just so that you can continue experimenting at no cost, right? You no longer have skin in the game, right? And this, I very much agree, is a big issue.
That you just nailed it there. I was literally about to say it's less so. I mean, it's even fine if you do a problem, you fail at it, and you're like, fuck it, I don't want to do it anymore. Let someone else figure it out. That's fine. The issue comes when the cost of the failure is not yours to bear. This is why socialism is such an abhorrent idea. Is the idea is that somebody makes a mistake, one person makes a mistake, but somebody else pays for it. And that is like you said, it's no skin in the game. That's the emergence of what I think is one of the most dangerous things for society is moral hazard. Is I can do something, but someone else is going to pay for it, and that gives you a game which is completely fucked up. Which is, if me and you're playing a heads or tails game, it's heads I win, tails you lose. It's completely unfair, and that's what I guess that's what this attempt to, because I guess the original Keynesian attempt or the original Keynesian dream, like, as misguided as it was, maybe was to try and use central banking tools or central plan tools to eliminate the cyclical nature of progress, right? Because everything is cyclical. We have seasons, we have good times, we have bad times, we have all this shit. But these idiot Keynesians in their myopia thought that they could remove that. But what they didn't realize is that every action has a cost. Every action has a reaction. We live in a universe that has, right? So if you want to then allow somebody to make bad choices, make decisions, but have no cost for that, who actually pays for it? Well, in this model, there's two people footing the bill, or maybe two groups footing the bill. It's the one being diluted, who's further from, as far away as possible from the monetary spigot. So whoever's close enough to the money printer is going to get the benefit first at the expense of everyone else. So that means that the losses are being, the bad mistakes are being socialized amongst everyone, whether they're good decision makers or bad decision makers. So that means good decision makers get slowed down and actually can't drive society forward, and already existing bad decision makers get driven further into the ground. And then on top of that, the other way that they socialize losses or camouflage the banking is by borrowing from the future. And this is what you discussed about debt. It's not that we owe ourselves, and what the fuck, who is ourselves? What does that even mean? It's that we are borrowing capital from the future. We are borrowing productive capacity from the future and bringing it forward to today. So that is the most selfish thing. So that means we're dumping that onto our kids and our kids, our children's children, to deal with as a problem. And that to me is like the most abhorrent. Like, it is kind of like what you said earlier. You can't escape responsibility, but we've kind of now living in a world where responsibility is trying to be pushed to somebody fucking else, anybody but me. Just push the responsibility away, just give it to somebody else. And the thing is, you're even responsible for that, so you'll have a price to pay for that. But the price is one where you become literally a prisoner to your own irresponsibility. It's fucking wild.
Yeah, right. It's a charade to try to push the responsibility away. But hey, that's not how the world works. Like, you jump off a cliff, you carry the responsibilities, you're gonna fall down. No way around it. Like, neither on the micro scale nor on the macro scale. Actions have consequences. Like, if you don't think that that's the case, well, I guess kill yourself. That's the logical next step, right? So yeah, it's quite. Yeah, it's really sad, and like, it has so many drastic bad consequences. But again, even for us, freedom-loving, rational thinkers, right? Again, we find ourselves in a huge problem. Like, the fiat empire is a massive problem, probably the biggest that we will have to fix in our lifetimes. Because if not, well, we have to live with the consequences, right, of not fixing that problem. So yeah, what are you going to do about it? Just cry and, well, kill yourself ultimately because it's hopeless? Or do you still have that, despite all this tyranny and all this slavery, do you still have that creative spirit to think of a better situation and to come up with creative ways to reach that, right? And this is what I love, like, so much about the cypherpunk ethos, right? Just write the code, like, build the tools, right? Build the tools for people to use to live a better life, to actually fix the problems on a small scale, on a big scale, any problem. It doesn't really matter, right? But actually fix them, right? Write the code. This is such an applied philosophy, and I mean, it gave us Bitcoin, right? The most beautiful solution to the biggest of problems.
I love how you said the most beautiful solution to the biggest of problems, because that's really what this is. This is genuinely. I could not think of a worse problem than the consistent thieving of the product of all of our labor through the form of inflation, outright fucking theft through taxation, and borrowing from all of our futures. There's nothing more civilizationary, if that's even a word, than that.
It's
it is
suicide.
genuinely the biggest problem. Yeah.
It's like it's a macro suicide. Like, how are you gonna kill a species? Well, make them eat each other, basically, right? Devour each other. That kills, literally.
Yeah, well, that reminds me. This is, I'm gonna have to listen back to this when we put it up, because I'm writing a piece called Bitcoin and the Great Filter, and I'm purely adamant. Like, I had a magic cookie about a week ago, and I was with this girl, and I started talking about Bitcoin, and I was talking about the Great Filter. I was like, Bitcoin is what gets us through the Great Filter, and I was like, I believe that we, other civilizations. I think we were talking about aliens. I think that was it, and I was saying, I don't know, whether there is aliens or anything out there, but if there was, they would have come up against this idea of the Great Filter. Is, did they blow themselves up, or did they eat themselves alive? And Bitcoin is, I think, the thing that enables a living species to go beyond the Great Filter, is to go beyond the point of either blowing themselves up or eating themselves alive. And I honestly don't think there's anything more important that's happening today than that. Is the renaissance of individual responsibility, the reintroduction of an incorruptible mechanism via which to value and measure and store the product of our labor. Like, what else could be more important? Like, it's incorruptible human action. there's nothing more important. On that, let's talk the advancement of Bitcoin privacy. So let's pull that old thread back in, which is the thread on Bitcoin as being the new so-called, or Bitcoin's becoming in the next couple of years, particularly as Bitcoin really starts to accelerate, the new Jew class or gypsy class, or the bourgeoisie, that will be blamed for shit, and then how Bitcoin privacy is a tool for I guess for protecting against that. So let's talk a little bit about what maybe you're doing at Wasabi. Let's talk maybe even deeper than that, is what is Bitcoin privacy, and how does it sort of emerge from the I guess quote unquote transparency that Bitcoin has.
Yeah, so I mean, just what is privacy? That is already really a tough question, and the way that I like to define it, again based on first principles and logical deduction, is that privacy is the fact that the individual has a choice of how to selectively reveal himself to other individuals, and that is something, again, very fundamental to how humans interact, right? Even if you meet someone, right? First of all, you have the choice of either meeting him or not, right? You could just, stay in your cave and never walk out, right? And stay forever like an anonymous individual that nobody knows about, right? But then ultimately you start, talking to other people, right? You approach them and you interact with them. And the way that you approach them and the things that you say to them, right, are all choices that you make of how you want to be seen by that other person, right? In what light, with what actions, with what words do you want that other person to recognize you, right? So privacy is simply having the choice, right, of whom you want to talk to, right, and what you want to say to them. And this is something as core to humanity as it possibly could be, right? It's very much tied in with individual human action. But why is it interesting to ask yourself if you should tell this to someone else, right? And I think, ultimately, as we said, right, words are just speech, non-scarce goods, right? Information that you can share without sacrificing them. So in general, you can reveal quite a lot about yourself, right, without ever needing to sacrifice anything, right? Because, it's just words after all. However, I think the line comes in when the non-scarce information that you share, right, the things that you say actually lead to you losing your scarce resources, right, the goods and services that you actually own, right, where if someone else takes them, you no longer have them, right? So here is it where it becomes interesting, right? Because, if you tell someone like, hey, I have in like here buried under this tree, I have like 100 gold coins, right? Well, so far you have not given anything up yet, you just spoken words, right? But know that this other individual knows, right, that there is some precious treasure buried somewhere on the ground and even unprotected, right? Well, you might as well just walk up and take it, right? But then the problem is for you, it's no longer there for you to take, right? You lost your scarce resource based on the non-scarce information that you shared, right? So if you want to protect your 100 gold coins, well, first of all, don't tell anyone that you have them and where they are, right? Because then it's frankly impossible for them to find them, right? If nobody knows that something is there, how are you going to take it? You don't even know that there is something to take, and let alone how much there is to take, right? So, for me, that aspect of privacy is therefore a tool to protect your property, right? To make sure that other people don't take the stuff that you want. And especially in days of cyberspace, where we're just immersed with non-scarce information, and our sharing of that non-scarce information to protect our property rights by choosing not to reveal some things in cyberspace is incredibly important. Because if you don't pay attention here and just blurt out everything to everyone, right, as the internet does, all of a sudden, all the people who don't like you, right, or all the people who would like to have the stuff that you have, are going to come after you, and they know exactly where to find it.
So it's one of the best explanations I've heard of for the raison d'etre for privacy. So then, talk me through then Bitcoin and how it enables privacy, and then how it also may have some I hate to call it privacy problems because it's a trade-off, right? But what people perceive as a potential privacy problem for Bitcoin. So talk me through that.
Yeah. So, what information do you have to reveal about yourself, right, to others if you want to use Bitcoin, right? Let's walk through it step by step, because I mean, Bitcoin is a social network. So, first of all, you're gonna have to reveal yourself. You're gonna have to talk to other people, right? That's just how the market works, and that's how money works, right? It's a language network basically. So, yeah, you're gonna reveal yourself. Question is how, right? So, first of all, how do you get paid? Well, what does the other person need to know from you? And that's basically only a Bitcoin address, and that's it. That's literally the only thing that you have to reveal to someone else to get paid, right? Fucking incredible, right? It doesn't need to know your name, your face, like your bank account, your address where you live. Nothing. Literally, the only thing that you need to reveal to get paid is your Bitcoin address. That's it. Just a bunch of gibberish, ones and zeros. Right? Crazy. Absolutely crazy. That alone. But there's more to it because, again, Bitcoin is a social network, right? And it's not just do you need to know your address and the sender needs to know the address, but everyone needs to know about this transaction. Right, that the sender sent to this receiving address such and such Bitcoin, right? The inputs and outputs of the transaction. This actually has to be known by everyone in the network, right? Everyone keeps a record of all the transactions that have ever happened. That's what a full node does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we got to do that is because we got to verify it, right? Did that money that's being spent actually exist, right? Were all the spending conditions of the transaction fulfilled? Right? All of these things have to be verified by everyone in the network and therefore known by everyone in the network, right? So this means you, in fact, have to reveal quite a lot to everyone, right? At least that the transaction happens. But again, basically none of the identifying informations is tied in that information revelation in the Bitcoin stack. Right now, there's exchange KYC, trusted third parties, unsecure internet, all that stuff that can attribute more information about yourself to the Bitcoin transaction that's happening. But Bitcoin can't fix that, unfortunately, at least not directly. The consequences of Bitcoin will fix that. But, the Bitcoin protocol itself, very simple with what it has to reveal. But one of the aspects where, again, you got to be careful is the revelation that all the many transactions that you made in this public network were actually made by one person, right? So you receive Bitcoin countless times for all the goods and services that you provide as a courageous entrepreneur, right? Now the art of Bitcoin privacy is to not tell everyone that all of these transactions belong to one person, or even worse, that they belong to you, right? So despite you needing to reveal information about the transaction, just so that everyone can verify it, at least don't reveal that all of these transactions belong to the same person, right? Because again, Bitcoin does not require that. And things like there are a lot of privacy catches where an action can unwantedly reveal more information about who owns which coins than you would like. And this is the difficulty of developing Bitcoin privacy software, is to not make these mistakes and to protect the user from inevitably making these mistakes.
Brilliant. Couple threads I want to pull on there. So I love how you said within the Bitcoin ecosystem, it does away with all of the excess junk that's required in the current financial legacy system in order for us to transact as human beings, in order for us to trade, in order for us to cooperate. It does away with all of that crap, and it enables anybody, anywhere, anytime to perform whatever transaction they want without needing to ask permission or without being able to be censored. And that is fundamentally important. And it does that, like you said, with a string of gibberish that has no relationship to you. Now, like you said, the outside world and the fact that Bitcoin is this Bitcoin's a new world, and then the old world is here. But because we have to build a bridge across, they can sort of build their little watchtowers on their side of the bridge to kind of see what the fuck's going on and try and attribute stuff to people that are crossing into the new world. But once they're in there, they can't really do fuck all, other than if they've managed to tag somebody on the way in, they might be able to, and I'm making up analogies here, but they might be able to attribute other actions to that person within the network to try and sting them for something. Now, when we sort of live in a hyper Bitcoinized world, all of this, that those accessories, they fall apart. They die as the critical mass of Bitcoin continues. So for me, I guess that's one pillar, and then the second pillar, like you said, is the art of actual Bitcoin privacy on the network itself, and that's a different thing, because that's sort of inside the Bitcoin ecosystem, is not attributing the thing to yourself necessarily, or not attributing everything that you have to one location to yourself, and that's a sort of separate art form. But this kind of where I want to touch there, because the second one I think talks to the work you're doing, particularly with Wasabi and CoinJoin and everything like that. But the first one is an interesting one, because Bitcoin's so-called open and public blockchain is such that, by design, is such that it can be verified, like you said. But I think the key augmentation there is verified easily, or cheaply, or quickly, or whatever verb we want to put in there. It's like it has to be done easily, because if that's not the case, you create a natural disincentive for anybody to want to be a verifier or a validator. If there's going to be a cost to doing so, it drives people away from that. And that right there is sort of like the very, 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 very important trade-off that Bitcoin made, or that the Bitcoin community sort of has converged on as a decision. Bitcoin didn't make that decision. It's the decision the Bitcoin network has made. And that is fundamentally important, because that is how I think we move towards having a global, sound, incorruptible, unmonopolizable money that breaks the state, and then moves us towards more so individual human action. Now, I know this is a long way of saying that Bitcoin diverges from all these Monero people. So can we talk a little bit about the trade-off that Monero's made, and why they, despite how they call themselves a privacy coin, why they are solving the problem in a fucking backwards way, and why it doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, so Monero is a really interesting project, because it's probably one of the only shitcoins out there that do something interesting and solve some really difficult problems. I mean, seriously, kudos to all the people working on it, because they do solve very interesting problems. And my disagreement is not in the importance of the problems, but it's about the trade-offs of the solution, right? And like specifically what you brought up, that aspect of easily verifying, right? That it is possible to verify, right, and to do so, rather efficiently. Like even Bitcoin has humongous troubles to verify efficiently, by the way, right? So it's not that we solved the problem, right? We're kind of in the glass house throwing stones, right? But it's just that the trade-offs chosen by Monero are more in favor of having difficult to verify privacy features. And that comes on multiple layers. I mean, for one, heavy cryptography involved, like all these Patterson commitments and confidential transactions, ring signatures, like crazy math. Like, I mean, first of all, are you really going to understand what's going on? I don't. Like, seriously, zero knowledge proofs are very unintuitive, and I guess very little people can verify the code that's going on, right? So that's a huge risk as a side. But it also means that verifying these zero knowledge proofs are infinitely more expensive than just verifying a regular signature or a Bitcoin script. So That is one thing, right? Verifying difficult cryptography. But the other thing is, and that's even that's for me the kind of killer argument, is the scaling of the blockchain itself. Because so in Bitcoin, because every transaction is public, and you know exactly which coin got spent, right? The coins that were already spent, you can just kind of forget about them, right? Or at least, either throw them away entirely, right? Which is called pruning your Bitcoin full node, or just store them on your hard drive and basically never look at them again, right? Unless you really want to rescan, right? Basically, everything that you need to remember is the set of unspent transaction outputs, right? The Bitcoin that have yet to be spent, right? Those that are currently being saved as cash balance. And this is a nice benefit, because now the more people spend their coins, right, and the fewer coins are being generated, well, then you have to keep track of less data, which is a humongous improvement in the performance of the verification of a full node. And specifically, ring signatures in the Monero network make that impossible, because you never know which output was actually spent, right? You always just have like a 1 in 40 chance that this output was spent, but you never know for sure, right? And other people will continuously put old coins into these ring signatures, and will therefore you just have to keep a track of all the outputs that were ever generated, even those that were already spent. Right? You still have to keep them fast read and write on disk, and you have to incur them in all the verification cost. You will have to consider all the previous outputs, basically. So that's just much more difficult to do. Not impossible, right? But a lot more difficult.
Interesting. So I guess they're the trade-off, and I was having a discussion with a Monero person, and you might have actually even been on that call. I think it was during like a Value of Bitcoin conference, like talk or something that we were giving, and you know, my position was that if we sort of, Monero seems to be, you know, making a set of trade-offs, and their solution to the problem that is what we discussed earlier, like the biggest problem in the world, which is the existence of a fiat state. Their solution is to sort of duck for cover and sort of, you know, trade amongst each other, etc. Whereas the solution is different, which is we're going to fucking take a shot at the king and we're going to knock him off the throne with something that is absolutely incorruptible, because it is verifiable, because it has economic mass, and because it actually takes it incentivizes the players in the existing game to actually come in and put their capital and their skin in the game here. So it kind of uses their own strength against them to rise up and basically topple the whole thing. And then, you know, that is, I think, the only solution to the bigger problem. Whereas I think Monero is kind of this attempt to remain, you know, down and, you know, kind of close to the gutter in that sense. And I don't think, I think it's in some ways noble, because, you know, I'm a black market maximalist, but it doesn't. It's sort of like it's an attempt to win, you know, the small battle, but not the actual war. And this is why I think that Bitcoin winning the war, we can then, in the Bitcoin world, use tools like what you're working on at Wasabi, etc., to maximize privacy in that world, because there we can maximize privacy. As so long as the old world exists, all we're doing is we're ducking and dodging, and we're not actually solving any of the major problems. Would you sort of agree with that sentiment, or?
Yeah, it's again a very interesting trade-off and different nuances in strategy. But to be honest, I'm not that comfortable that, you know, that hyper Bitcoinization strategy is actually going to be like fruitful, because, you know, if you poke the bear, he's going to come back at you. And governments only ban what is popular, right? So the more popular Bitcoin becomes, eventually they're going to start banning it, right? And actually go after it, right? So again, we live in this world of immense envy and like jealousy that yeah, I mean, I'm not sure really. Satoshi said that Bitcoin like will not solve all these political problems at scale, but at least it will give us like a brief period, like a brief time window of liberty in which we can manifest and improve the situation. And maybe it turns out like that. Like maybe Bitcoin, in fact, is not enough to actually topple the fiat empire, because hey, that this empire is massive and very deeply rooted. It's not going to be an easy and quick thing to actually destroy it. I think Bitcoin has the best chance of doing so, right? But I'm absolutely not 100% convinced that it's doable with this technology. So yeah, maybe actually staying under the radar for longer, building more, fine honing the weapons more before going on the all-out hyper Bitcoinization offensive might be a good strategy. Well, but the thing is, Honey Badger don't care, right? And he's just gonna burst out and do its thing and piss off people and at an exponential rate. So yeah, there's nothing that my blabbering can stop here, and I'm all in on the boat. So I mean,
it's a complex problem. That's the thing. I think maybe, if I could infer what you're saying, it's like, Bitcoin is not sort of like, even hyper Bitcoinization is not some sort of utopian future where we're all going to be fucking singing Kumbaya. And even if in a hyper Bitcoinized world, the fact that you remove the capacity for somebody to play the unfair game, I think that just changes the incentives via which society operates. So I think that's I think at the core of the Bitcoin fix is this meme. But maybe what you're saying is that along the way, the transition towards a more Bitcoin type world is where all the mess is going to happen. And as a result, we need to stay vigilant. We need to play we need to war like gorillas, basically, and not the chimp type gorillas. But this is still a guerrilla warfare on that path. But I've got this analogy. It's like, you have silver bullets or you have multiple lead bullets, right? So sorry, you have a silver bullet or multiple lead bullets. Whilst I think Bitcoin, broadly speaking, is like the silver bullet, the process of hyper Bitcoinization is a series of lead bullets. It is people putting capital in the network. It is people holding. It is people building privacy tools. It is people writing. It is podcasts. It is us sort of harassing everyone that we know that Bitcoin needs to come in. It is the collapse of the state. It is the loss of faith in the issuance of new currency. It's fucking all of this, and Bitcoin sort of seems to be empowered by all of these things. But it's like it's the best shot that we have, but it's no reason for any of us to stay complacent along the way, because it's the transition where most of the mess will actually occur.
Yeah, I do think it's our best opportunity as of now. But what I like to focus on is that it's not going to be the last opportunity. It's not going to be the last bullet that we're going to create. Like this is a like everlasting war basically between productivity and leechers, right? And it's going to be a massive struggle for eternity, basically. And even if Bitcoin fails, right, and tyranny subsides for a little bit longer, I don't think that the human spirit can be crushed that easily and that permanently. Like people will still solve problems regardless of how bad the situation gets, right? Problems will be difficult or more difficult, and more people will fail with them. But still, even if we don't make it work with Bitcoin, like I have confidence in that entrepreneurial genius to continuously find problems and find solutions on how to fix them.
So I guess my whole thesis about the difference between like a Monero and a Bitcoin is almost, you mentioned this idea of, I guess, different strategies to fight the war, and is Bitcoin the final and last shot? Would it fail and all this sort of stuff? For me, the reason I'm so adamant that Bitcoin is not only the most important. I actually think it's our last shot. I actually think if we fail Bitcoin, we're actually fucked, because the central planners have enough technological prowess now to sort of move us towards a blend of 1984 and Brave New World. So I think that is a real danger, because that couldn't be done before, because technologically speaking, we weren't, or central powers weren't strong enough. But now I think that is definitely a reality. So I think, my analogy for Bitcoin is, if you're gonna fight a war, and I don't know if this is Sun Tzu or whatever, but you go and you destroy the enemy's capacity to feed themselves. And the fiat enemy in this sense feed themselves from our productive capacity. Like, we work, they tax us, they inflate the money, they borrow from our future. Like that's how that parasite persists. And the reason why I think Bitcoin is such a powerful tool is because it eliminates their capacity to do that. Now, they may still be able to, go after some individuals, but as the feast that the state was used to disappears, and they can't feed on that, they not only start to fall apart themselves, but they panic, and they don't know what and where to go. And this is sort of also ties into why it will be messy along the way, and why Bitcoin privacy along the way is extraordinarily important. But I honestly think that it is the king hit, because it kills their food source. They can't feed off us. So I don't know if you've got any color you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with your sentiment here. And Bitcoin for sure is like, if Bitcoin fails, we're going to have to live with the consequences of Bitcoin failing. And these consequences will be dire, like really dire. Right? More untamed fiat regime is going to be dreadful. Still, even in that situation, like reading Man's Search for Meaning, or the Gulag Archipelago, like books like this, like, humans are quite powerful creatures, actually. And even in these humongously bad circumstances, the human spirit, I think, still survives. Of course, well, to a diminishing return or extent, just because of all the harassment, but nevertheless. And to your point that now the bureaucrats and the social planners have better technology to do the central planning. This is somewhat nice by the idea from Hayek's pretense of knowledge, right? Which is it's not just about having a lot of information and being able to go through all that information. Like, he even back in those days makes the point that even if the central planners would have all possible information, like as much as possible, the reason why socialism and central planning ultimately fails is because of a lack of prices and a lack of proven values. Right? Not just values that are guessed or speculated in psychology, right? But values that are actually like value hierarchies are actually proven in the individual action itself. So I'm like, that's why I have a fundamental hope that even with all the massive information scale and the computational power to make sense of all that much information, I still think that socialism will ultimately fail. For the same reasons as Mises and Hayek lays them out. But nevertheless, right, the thieves are going to get better. And they're going to use the technology to get better. And yes, absolutely, having a massive information surveillance campaign and the computational power to make sense of that is a phenomenal tool in the hands of thieves. And they're going to continue to use it at devastating extents, right?
I agree with you. Let me. I want to pull up a paragraph, because I want to say this right, from a piece. Did you ever read Utopian Dystopias?
I don't recall. Probably not.
Okay, I'm gonna have to send it to you. But there's a paragraph in here about exactly this. Where the fuck is it? But it literally talks about that. So. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit of it. So I say Homo sapiens, we are the latest evolutionary experiment, and we're LARPing our way into the history books, assuming, of course, we make it through the great filter. And therein lies my most significant personal concern. I know that central planning will not work. You don't have to be a genius to realize that. My fear is the central planners destroy everything around us, similar to how the USSR nuked itself, and or make all of humanity obsolete by unleashing some sort of AI-style Leviathan in its arrogant pursuit for the ultimate utopia. The greatest risk is not the idiots succeeding, but the idiots blowing everything up and taking the intelligent and virtuous down with them. So I guess I agree with you in the sense that socialism, no matter what they do, they can't succeed. They'll always blow up. But their capacity to fuck things up this time is so widespread that it's not as isolated as before. You know, the Nazis and that was isolated. You know, the USSR, the Gulag Archipelago, that was isolated. North Korea is isolated. So these smaller scale fuck ups can blow up without blowing everything else up. But I fear that, and we've sort of seen this with 2020, is how the bureaucrats, just through it doesn't even need a conspiracy theory to explain. It's just through sheer ass covering that they don't want to be the one that says the thing contrary. That they sort of all converge to this almost attempt to govern globally, as you know, one group, and that has potentially really catastrophic outcomes. Now maybe it's not that the entire human race gets wiped out, but maybe we sort of throw ourselves back 800-900 years. So I think that is for me, the danger is not that they succeed. The danger is that they fuck it up so badly that it takes us another couple hundred years to get to where we got to now, or we just wipe ourselves out completely. I don't know.
Yeah, but both are dire outcomes. Not sure which one is worse. Hopefully, we can prevent both. But yeah, I mean, you know, that's why we Bitcoin. Like that's why we do the shit we do, because it's that important of work. At least we perceive it to be. And you know, I hope we're wrong about this, right? I hope that the threat is not that big. But I don't know. After like a lot of thinking about it, it seems to get bigger by the second. So yeah, we got to fix it.
It does. It's the slippery slope, man. It's the like, again, when you read a bit of history, you know, and people sort of wonder how things got so bad. It's that they compound on each other. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, you know, cancel culture didn't start off really bad. It started off really small. It's like, oh, you know, you just shouldn't say that about people. You know, it started off as a politeness, but now it's sort of encroached all the way to the point where you can't have fucking kids' books. You know, they're burning books again. It's like they're doing exactly what they say you shouldn't do, but they're doing it again. And this is sort of it's almost like a harmonic effect, like the chaos of the bad decision making creates more bad decision making. And this is, again, I would say, a fiat effect, is that you make the natural cyclical nature of you magnify its amplitude, and you sort of you fake all the good, and then you fucking collapse so badly on the way down. And I think honestly it's dangerous, and that's, again, Bitcoin removes their food source, and in doing so starves the fucking beast. And I can't see any other strategy in this warfare, in this war, sorry, that is more potent in terms of succeeding. So anyway, let's talk practicality. Unless you have any more philosophical pieces you want to add to that.
No, I do enjoy the blabbering about all the theory and all the philosophy of it. But you know, again, what are we going to do about it? Obviously, Bitcoin is the answer, but there's a lot of nuance in it.
Indeed. Okay, so let's talk answers to, I guess, what I think is the biggest problem. Like I'm still committed, not committed, but I'm convinced that Bitcoin wins in the end anyway. The only question for me is, how clean or how manageable that pathway is. And this is where the answers need to be found. It's not about finding the fucking answers to hyper Bitcoinization, because we don't know what that's going to look like, when it's going to happen, none of that shit. What we do know now is that Bitcoin is the only fucking alternative and the best alternative we have to this Leviathan. So what are the solutions along the way? And, you know, a series of them involve being able to protect yourself. And one of the strongest mechanisms for protection is privacy. So talk to me about some of the Bitcoin privacy initiatives, you know, that you're working on that are occurring in the broader network.
Yeah, so it's so difficult to change Bitcoin's consensus rules, right? And to add magic like ring signatures or stuff that you can do in different monetary networks, but you just cannot change Bitcoin to be that, right? So it's going to be difficult to improve the privacy on the base layer to like an exponential improvement. Right? Sure, we can marginally improve things, and stuff like Taproot is a great example here. Like, it does improve Bitcoin privacy by quite a lot, right? Because previously, for example, if you were using a multi-signature, you have to reveal yourself to be using a multi-signature, right? You had to put the script with object multisig 2 out of 3 or something with these public keys. You had to put that on the chain. Everyone knew about it. Everyone had to verify it, right? So you did have to reveal more information about that, and that goes the same for things like more advanced smart contracts like Lightning Network or other CoinSwap things. But what Taproot does is, with some genius cryptographic tricks that are possible with Schnorr signatures, is that it hides the fact that a multi-sig policy is actually being used, but it just looks like a single public key and a single signature, right? So all of a sudden, everyone who actually uses multi-signature looks like if he would be using a single signature, and vice versa, right? So the anonymity set size grows. More people look like the same, and that's in general a good thing for privacy. So, things like this are I think going to be the main forefront on the network layer, at least in the short term future.
So let's pull a little bit on threads of Taproot. So again, I haven't understood personally too much about Taproot, except I have listened to a podcast or two about Schnorr signatures. So I understood that is a huge improvement to the I think, what is it, ECDSA or ESDCA?
ECDSA, exactly.
ECDCA, that's it. That schema, because Schnorr allows you to basically add signatures. So that made a lot of sense to me, and so I understood particularly the increasing the anonymity set by making multi-sig and single sig transactions all look the same, right? I didn't know that was actually a part of the Taproot implementation, though. So why is it called Taproot? And tell me more about what the Taproot implementation wants to do outside of the implementation of Schnorr signatures, or is that really all it is?
No, there are actually like 3 BIPs that are bundled together as the Taproot soft fork upgrade. One of them is a change from elliptic curve digital signature algorithms to Schnorr digital signature algorithms, right? Both math formulas where you can prove that you know something without revealing your secret, right, to make a digital signature. But it's just that Schnorr signatures are a much simpler math formula, like just easier to do things with. And therefore, you can build more beautiful things on top, like, for example, this public key aggregation and signature aggregation with this MUSIC protocol. But there is another aspect to Taproot itself, and that is this actual where the name comes from, the Taproot construction. So how does it currently work? Like, if you have, like, for example, Lightning Network, different spending conditions, right, of who can spend this coin. Either it's a multi-signature between Alice and Bob, right? Or you can spend it with only Bob's key, right, after 1 week, right, for example. Or Alice's key can spend it if she also has a secret, right? These are basically the 3 spending conditions for a Lightning Network script, like the private property contract that these 2 individuals go into here. But it's, again, you have to reveal all of this to everyone, right? So in this transaction, you put all of these 3 spending conditions, and you prove that that your transaction verifies one of them, right? So for example, you provide the 2 out of 2 multi-signature, right? And then every full node checks, okay, these are the 3 possible spending conditions, and yes, one of them got fulfilled, right? But that means, again, you just reveal a bunch about your on-chain activity, right? Everyone verifies all 3 scripts. And the idea of Taproot is to, instead of having just a linear line of all the scripts where you have to reveal all of them, you have a tree structure, right? A Merkle tree, basically, where each spending condition is a unique and independent called leaf of the tree, like the endpoint of the tree, right? So in our case, you would have 3, like, or actually, you only would have 2 spending conditions at the end of the tree. And those are, for example, Bob can spend it by himself after 1 week, or Alice can spend it by herself if she has that additional secret, right? These are the 2 spending conditions that we put at the bottom of the tree, right?
Why is it only 2 now instead of 3?
Exactly. That's the interesting thing. Why is it actually called Taproot? What is a taproot, right? And a taproot is something that grows in the ground, right? And it has roots, right? But it has one, like, very, very big root. Like, the prime example is a carrot, right? A carrot grows in the ground. It has a bunch of small little roots that are going all over the place, and the very big, like, orange root that we eat as a carrot, right? So same analogy goes here in the tree, right? We have some small branches, like, for example, the Bob can spend by himself or Alice can spend by herself. These 2 branches are small branches that might be used, but we have one branch that is like the biggest one, that has the highest likelihood of being used. And that is usually the everyone agrees case, right? In the vast majority of economic trades, both parties agree, and both parties are happy, and both parties collaborate, right? Alice and Bob signed the transaction together, right? And this is just the 2 out of 2 multi-signature, right? So what we can do actually is aggregate this to one single aggregated public key, and just represent this as the top level of the tree, like the actual root of it, where the tree begins. And this basically means, so why is this interesting? In the case where everyone agrees, in that most common cooperative case, both Alice and Bob sign the signature. The only thing that is revealed is one public key and one signature on chain. There's nothing else in this transaction script, right? You don't reveal that there was a tree of different script conditions, and you don't even reveal how many script conditions you used, right? Anything that is seen is on-chain, one public key, one signature, without anyone knowing that there was some more advanced things, like more refined arguments to who can spend this Bitcoin, somewhere hidden in the transaction construction or in the address. But in the case where the 2 parties do not agree, where the most common cooperative case does not kick in, right, where Alice goes offline, right, or runs away, and Bob sits there alone, right? In that case, you only reveal one of these tab leaves, one of these separate spending conditions, and you kind of prove that this is a valid spending condition that was committed to at the beginning in the address, and you only provide a proof for this one part of the spending condition. For example, Bob's signature, after a certain time, after the 1 week. And then if you spend it with Bob's case, nothing about the spending condition with Alice is revealed, right? You just reveal that you just validated the script with Bob, but nobody knows, no full node ever will find out that there was in fact the script where Alice could spend the coins too. So here again, Taproot is about selectively revealing yourself on the Bitcoin network so that multi-signatures look like single signatures, and so that you can get very advanced and very complex multi-layered spending conditions on who can spend this coin in any edge case that you can come up with, right? But you only reveal that one spending condition that you ultimately end up using to spend that coin, and none of the other spending conditions.
See, so it's only revealed when the action is taken. So versus the way it currently operates is that all of the conditions are listed, irrespective of the decision you've made.
Exactly. And that has
Okay.
two major downsides. First of all, you got to read all this data. Every full node got to read it, and every full node got to verify it, right? That's just a lot of computational cost to verify these types of scripts, right? Again, verification cost is a huge part in the Bitcoin trade-off spectrum. And the other thing is, it sucks for privacy. Why do you have to tell someone what an edge case in a contract was if that edge case never manifested itself, right? If you don't use it, nobody got to verify it, right? So why do you got to reveal it? Well, you don't actually with Taproot.
So you said, okay, so that's two. Was there a third, you said, benefit of having Taproot?
I said that there were three BIPs, three Bitcoin improvement proposals that bundle together as the Taproot upgrade. First is the Schnorr signature algorithm, which is defined and laid out there. The second is this tab script idea, right, to have this tree construction of scripts, right, which, by the way, the idea goes back to 2012 or something. So it's nothing new, but now it's actually manifested.
Possible, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. And the third thing is an addition to Bitcoin opcodes. So the operational codes that are used in the Bitcoin script itself, in the programming language. This is basically changes to how we can write contracts of who can spend Bitcoin, right? Specifically changes that make Schnorr signatures work, and key aggregation with Schnorr signatures and things like this. So that's some low level developer lawyer speak, basically. I mean, that's what Bitcoin script developers are. They write contracts, right? But hopefully you as the end user won't have to deal with Bitcoin scripts. But I mean, actually, why not? There are things that make that easier too.
Okay, so what are some of the arguments against Taproot? So it's obviously it hasn't been implemented yet. Changing anything on Bitcoin is difficult. So what are some of the arguments against it, or what are some of the things that people are saying that why we shouldn't potentially do Taproot?
Yeah, I think the biggest argument is the one that you brought up. Changing Bitcoin is a dangerous thing. We found somehow consensus on this magical internet money. Any change that we're going to propose to it is going to be dangerous, and especially it's going to be a dangerous precedent, a dangerous first action, right?
Precedent.
Yeah, precedent. Yes. So what happens if you if in 20 years' time someone just comes along and says, "Oh, let's change to 42 million Bitcoin and let's give me all the other 21," right? Well, that's also a change in the Bitcoin rules. I mean, we agreed to changes previously, right? Maybe we're going to agree to that one too, right? So it's always tricky to kind of patch the machine as it's flying. And it's, again, sets a very dangerous precedent. So as much as I would love to use Taproot 2 years ago, I'm happy that it's still not here. And I'm happy that it's still a pain in the ass to get activated, because that shows that Bitcoin is resilient and that these rules that we set are actually basically set in stones. And, even in something like Taproot, where, to be honest, other than this, there's almost no good argument against it. It's better for verification speed, it's better for privacy, it's better for usability. We can, Bitcoin does the same thing, but it does it better. It's like an all-out win. There's really not much of a serious concern. Other than some small nuances, it's a new address type, and that will kind of split the anonymity set, which is true, but it's a very short-sighted argument. So yeah, there has been a lot of debate for years, and I personally cannot come up with a really solid argument that would convince me.
So is it like SegWit in a sense that it's released into the network, but because it's backwards compatible, it sort of runs alongside, and then people sort of have to move over to, Taproot type. You said the addresses are slightly different, etc. Is that sort of what needs to happen here, or?
Yeah, so it is a change to the rules. The question is it a hard forking change or a soft forking change, right? That's the first real. Do we break previous rules? Right? If an old node will verify a Taproot block or a transaction, what will it say? Will it say, yeah, this is valid, or will it say, no, this is invalid, get out of here? Right? Because if old nodes will say that Taproot transactions are invalid, well, that's a hard fork, right? You have to upgrade, otherwise nobody can use Taproot. So that's just a no-go. That's not how Bitcoin works. So thankfully that won't be an option. So it is a soft fork, right? But just because it's a soft fork does not mean that it's magically this workable thing that just works. Like we still have to be careful to not split the chain and to not rip apart the network, because well, it is a change in the rules, and there can be a disagreement in many edge cases where this actually leads to people like disagreeing on what the latest Bitcoin block is. And yeah, it's a nuanced trade-off here, but I think it will be possible to achieve a clean activation.
Okay, describe to me, what do you mean by clean activation?
Basically that, so the thing is, like if you, like even if your full node verifies Taproot transactions, right? If there are no Taproot transactions in a Bitcoin block, right, then what are you going to do about it, right? If you cannot get into a Bitcoin block, well, that sucks. Your transaction is not real. So that's one of the things, right? Miners actually have to confirm Taproot transactions. Now, why would they do that? Well, because they get paid a fee, right? That's the only reason why they do anything. And I mean, that is somewhat taken care of. But the issue is if like there are, because in the way that these software updates work, like the people who update to the new version of the soft fork should start enforcing these rules at the same time. Like if different nodes start enforcing the rules at different times, that can lead to like difficult like trade-offs, because all of a sudden your node, like I'm probably failing to explain it, but and it is a rather nuanced argument. But the thing is, if you want to upgrade, you gotta make it coordinated with everyone else. Otherwise, blocks might be considered invalid, or miners will do reorganizations, and yeah, that's like things like a user-activated soft fork are actually extremely dangerous, because that basically means that nodes say, well, any block that does not signal readiness for Taproot, I will consider invalid. Right? So all of a sudden, miners are producing valid blocks according to the old node's rules, because, well, they're just regular blocks. But because they don't signal the readiness for Taproot, the user-activated soft fork clients say, nope, that's not a valid block. Right? And all of a sudden, at least themselves, right, are off the network. Right? And so if the majority of miners just continues producing non-signaling Taproot blocks, well, the old nodes will still see these blocks as valid, but the new nodes will say, nope, that's no longer a valid block. And that's basically a split in the network.
So how did we navigate this during the SegWit battle and that user-activated soft fork? Because I know it took ages. I mean, even to this day, SegWit is not. Well, maybe talk me through the nuance here. Is like, because they say, SegWit's not in use by XYZ exchange, but the exchanges aren't really important because they're just sort of pointing to an address. So has SegWit sort of been adopted by all nodes and all miners on the network at this stage, and as such, it's actually got 100% activation, but it's not fully in use? Or talk me through the UASF on SegWit.
Yeah, so with any change to the rules, right, we have this proposed change, and ultimately the users will update their software to verify these change of the rules, right? The question is, when do we actually enforce these rules? And how do we reach consensus on at what time do we start, right? And that is basically the activation process of a soft fork. Again, so many nuances with this, and I'm not a big Bitcoin wizard with a long beard, so probably going to be wrong about half of this. But so the way that it happened with SegWit was that, as with previous soft forks, we said that the way that we reach a consensus on when to activate it is that that miners will produce blocks that signal that their nodes are upgraded and that they are ready for Taproot. They literally signal readiness. Yes, I'm valid for to verify Taproot, or sorry, SegWit outputs. And like we can do this, or why do we do this with Bitcoin miners? Because it's somewhat of like a decentralized and distributed and provable kind of skin in the game, right? These are economic nodes, and we can actually prove that just by them mining Bitcoin blocks. So this was a nice kind of, well, a signaling mechanism for the broader Bitcoin ecosystem in general. Because, well, it's just difficult to coordinate, a bunch of businessmen, just exchanges and, pizza merchants and all those. It is very difficult to kind of get their signal for readiness, other than Twitter, and that's very manipulative, right? So, and this is basically known as a miner activated soft fork. Nothing wrong with that, right? It basically just means that that a certain percentage of miners, with SegWit it was 95%, signal that their full nodes are upgraded to Taproot and that they are ready to handle Taproot or SegWit transactions accordingly, right, to the new rules, which is important that the miners do that. And the thing is, because of many somewhat political reasons, a lot of miners did not signal this readiness. Right? They simply refused to be part of activating the SegWit upgrade, even though it did reach rough consensus in the Bitcoin ecosystem, I would say. So here there was like a discrepancy between the rough consensus for every Bitcoin user, which was, SegWit is a smart idea. We can do lots of things with it, so let's do it. It doesn't break any of the rules. It's like an ethical change and so on. But miners just did not activate it. And then we kind of switched it around and said, well, miners, you don't get to deny users to say how they can spend their Bitcoin, right? That's not how the Bitcoin system works. Users will just say that if you do not signal the readiness, if you do not accept to confirm Taproot transactions, your block is simply going to be invalid. And, well, I can do that because it's my node. And if I say your block is invalid, fuck you, your block is invalid. Right? And you're not going to get the 6.25 Bitcoin in reward. Right? So this is basically then what a user-activated soft fork is. Different ways to do that, like different ways to find the time. But with SegWit, it was like on August 1st, this was only a threat, so to say, like because in fact, before this flag day activation of the user activated soft fork actually kicked in, all of a sudden miners started to signal Taproot readiness, SegWit readiness, and we reached over the 95% threshold, right? So because there was this outcry of users to, hey, if you no longer produce SegWit blocks, your block is not going to be valid for me. That was somewhat of a threat enough, so to speak, though a non-violent threat, like a peaceful threat, that kind of kicked the miners into the butt to, do what they're paid for, and that is to confirm the Bitcoin transactions the Bitcoin users want them to confirm.
Interesting. So we sort of, in a sense, the node operators and the network, or the users on the network, kind of forced the hand of the miners in that sense, right?
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like it's a genius thing, because that's very much how Bitcoin works, right? I make the rules. Like, I run the full node. I can change it to whatever the fuck I want, right? And you're gonna play by my rules, otherwise I kick you out of my network, right? And I no longer talk to you. That's the ethos of Bitcoin. That's anarchy and money, right?
Yeah, I fucking love it. Was there enough of a critical mass of nodes that sort of flipped over and signaled that sort of, was visible by the miners? Like, how was that signaled by the community?
That's exactly it. It's very difficult to signal that, like, and to signal it provably and verifiably. That's why we use miner signaling in the first place, right? Because we just cannot prove how many people run the full nodes that verify this code. It's just an impossibility to prove, right? My guess is actually that, I don't know, there were maybe, 50, 100 user activated software nodes out of there. I mean, I was one of them, but I'm not a me meaningful merchant getting paid, right? Like I'm like a tiny blimp in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So like I think that it was actually a very small number of users who actually ran that full node and would have actually forked themselves off the network if it happened, right? Because that's the other thing. Like if miners just continue to not producing blocks according to a SegWit, then you don't have any blocks on your blockchain, right? So it's useless, right? Then the question is, do you revert back and kind of give in and say, okay, let's stop that. I want to be on the main Bitcoin chain again where everyone else is. So I will just run the regular previous software client for my full node that does not activate with a user activated soft fork.
Yeah, well, fuck this. This is, I can see the contention now with Taproot. So I guess, what then is the? I mean, you tried to explain the process, so there's no point in sort of beating a dead horse there. It's like it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. So I guess it's almost like a campaign over a period of time to sort of, suggest that this is good and, have people review the BIPs. Is there a suggested time or a suggested date or a suggested block that, people are thinking of introducing Taproot at this stage, or is that still up for discussion?
Yeah, that was a very in-depth conversation for the last half year or so, I would say. And so far, there were difficulties to reach consensus on how to activate this consensus change. Difficulties of free software organization all the way down. And there was like the big question was user activated soft fork or miner activated soft fork. And I think just based on the horrible experience of last time, like everyone was still kind of butthurt and was afraid of doing a miner activated soft fork because, well, last time they fucked it up, right? So everyone was kind of trigger happy to like go like, oh, I'm threatening these bastards again that I don't pay you if you don't do that, right? I was one of them, to be honest. Like initially, I was like, no, the Taproot is awesome. We like it. Full nodes make the rules. Let's just roll out that. But the more I was thinking about it, it's just super dangerous, man. Like user activated soft forks are really a dangerous thing because they can very easily lead to a network split. Like if miners just don't mine Taproot transactions, all those user activated soft fork nodes are going to be like uselessly floating around on a different network. That's a pain in the ass, man. We don't want to have that. So miner signaling really makes sense, I think, just because it is a provable way to enforce the activation consensus. Which is just very difficult to do. So a recent proposal that was put out there that I think has somewhat reached a rough consensus at this point, with a lot of acknowledgement from different people, is the so-called speedy trial activation. And this is basically a fail-fast miner activated soft fork. So I think the SegWit miner activated soft fork had like a 1 year time period, if I remember correctly. Like if over the next 1 year at any point 95% of miners signal readiness for SegWit, we will activate it. Right? That's so what the speedy trial is about is basically to reduce that timeout to 3 months. So if within the next 3 months miners activate and they actually reduce the value to 90% of miners signal readiness for Taproot, we will activate it. Right. So this is if miners play ball, if they do what is clearly the consensus of the community of this rule change, then we will just activate it with a miner activated soft fork. If not, then we will increase that timeout and think about a different activation method, like, for example, user activated soft fork. So the idea is basically to give the miners a chance to play ball. But if they don't within 3 months, we will find out quickly, and we will then, be able to take further actions quickly. And I think that's probably a reasonable approach, specifically with something as non-contentious as Taproot, that doesn't have all the ASIC boost craziness that SegWit had, that fucked up the game theory completely. So I hope that it's going to be good enough to ensure a stable but swift update of the consensus rules. So yeah, but there's so many nuances to it, and yeah, it seems it's still going to be some time out.
Crazy, crazy. Okay, let's not get stuck in these weeds then. So let's move on to what are some of the other. So we've got Taproot. You also mentioned that. I mean, don't even have to mention it. The work you guys are doing at Wasabi is all around CoinJoin. So talk me through some of the stuff that's happening in that world with respect to privacy enhancing, etc.
Yeah, I mean, based on the last couple minutes of conversation, you know, you will somewhat feel the pain of trying to improve Bitcoin consensus rules and improving the privacy aspects on the base layer. I mean, for fuck's sake. So, like, that's a problem. How do we fix it, right? I think the way to fix that is with a client-side software, like the way that you talk to the existing Bitcoin network, right? And the way that you build your transactions, and things like this. So I think that's where we can make the biggest exponential improvement to privacy in the space, is by having like user interfacing client software that implements all the privacy best practices that we know that we can currently use. And I think Wasabi has been like a pioneer in this space, in that regard. Like, the vision has always been to make Bitcoin privacy usable, right? And you know, even in the very first stage of Wasabi 1.0 that was released, well, exactly 1 year after SegWit activation, by the way, August 1st, 2018, it did a lot of the things right. Like, for example, network level privacy works by default for every user out of the box, magically under the hood. Like, if you install Wasabi, you all of a sudden turn into a power Tor user with the craziest, longest beard, right? So like, you run multiple different Tor identities that talk in parallel streams to every peer in the Bitcoin network with a new identity, like ridiculous. Or things like how to verify how much Bitcoin, or how to find out how much Bitcoin you have without actually verifying the entire blockchain. Basically, if you don't verify the blockchain, someone else will have to do it. So the question is rather, how do you talk to that person that verifies the blockchain for you without you revealing all the sensitive financial information, like which transactions are you interested in, right? And Wasabi solved that since day one with these BIP158 block filters. Like, some stuff we probably don't even have to get into it, but the gist of it is, when you use Wasabi, you don't send your public keys to anyone, right? Your public keys, your addresses always stay on your own network, and you don't cluster all your coins just by asking someone else how much money you have, and that's like, all of that worked under the hood. You know, and even things like the CoinJoin worked quite well. Like, it was the first really nice usable user interface for CoinJoins, that like really made sense, and was very honest about how Bitcoin works. Like, just things that it shows you individual coins instead of a total balance. Like, this was radically new at that point, but it's just the honest way to look at Bitcoin, right? So a lot of these things were done right, but there were just many more things that we could improve in the future, and that's somewhat of the next epoch of Wasabi.
Interesting. So I like what you said there, is the differentiation between trying to improve privacy on chain versus doing it on the client side. So the talk to me about confidential transactions and why that. I guess I've kind of loaded the question, but why that is potentially not a good idea.
Yeah, I think we talked about some of that already, right? The main, or well, actually, wait. With confidential transactions, that we actually did not yet talk about, and that is basically that you hide the amounts of the transaction on the blockchain itself. So you don't know the value of the inputs that is being spent, and you also don't know the value of the outputs that are being generated, right? But still, you can verify that nobody printed any money. Right, that everyone had the money that they were spending, and nobody was making things up. like beautiful cryptography, fucking genius, right? But it has as a main downside that it has more like it has a new assumption that the basic like that Bitcoin does not have, right? Currently, you just see the Bitcoin inputs and output values, so there are no like cryptographic assumptions on zero knowledge proofs and things. Though I don't even think that that's a good argument because these assumptions are very reasonable and they work, and we rely on them even in Bitcoin with all types of cryptography. So I don't even think that that's an issue. I just think that the main issue with is in the implementation of this thing. I mean, zero knowledge proofs are crazy magic, and they're like only a handful of people who can implement them securely, right? And who can review that implementation, actually make sure that it works, that it doesn't have any counterintuitive bugs. Like super difficult, and to do that in like a in like a Bitcoin base layer type of thing. I mean, doable but challenging for sure. So yeah, and I mean, main argument, of course, it's not in the Bitcoin base layer. So what are we going to do about it? We're not going to hard fork it, change it like that. Yeah, is interesting. We can use the same technology, the same primitives in Bitcoin, just not on the base layer, but on other layers. Specifically in coin join coordination. There are a lot of zero knowledge proofs in coin joins. Like even the old zero link coin join protocol was using Chaumian blind signatures, right? Those like that's a zero knowledge proof basically. It's very limited zero knowledge proof, and it doesn't really like it has some because we use that we have some weird downsides. Like for example, every user needs to get exactly the same amount. Like in Wasabi's case, 0.1 Bitcoin. Like, and this means we have a minimum denomination, right? If you want to be part of the coin join, you got to have at least 10 million sats. You know, that's a fortune, right? So that sucks that only the rich whales, basically, who are like Satoshi fucking multi-millionaires, like ridiculous, like only the aristocrats basically can use CoinJoin. So that sucks. But it also means that like we cannot do any payments inside the coin join, right? Because you will never want to send exactly 0.10125893 Bitcoin, like some arbitrarily chosen number. Like that's not going to be the payment that you want to make, right? So payments in a coin join basically become impossible just because of the cryptographic layer itself. And these were some of the major downsides that we had in CoinJoin over the last, well, couple of years. And we're about to improve that by quite a lot with research that has been going on for like a year and a half now at Wasabi. And basically the result of that is a complete new CoinJoin protocol called Wabi-Sabi. And just as a quick aside, this is some...
I remember you kind of telling me about some of this stuff last time. So go ahead, riff away.
Yeah, so and again, Wabi-Sabi uses advanced zero knowledge proofs. And we even use Patterson commitments and confidential transactions, right? So we take all of the research that the Monero guys have done, and we just copy it and use it for Bitcoin, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like, the Monero people are actually doing interesting shit, and we can use it, right? And just because the technology comes from a shitcoin doesn't mean it's bad technology and that we cannot use it for Bitcoin. Quite the contrary, actually. So we use all of this advanced magic to coordinate arbitrary value coin joins. Basically, like, and that's just fucking genius. Like, it has multiple aspects. Mainly that, for example, you can register multiple inputs. Like all of a sudden you have 5 inputs registered in the coin join, but even the coordinator does not know that one person controls all of these 5 coins. Right? This like common ownership heuristic is completely broken just by the cryptography that we use. And another thing is you can register multiple outputs, right? You can like pay to 5 addresses in one single transaction, and the coordinator will not know that these 5 transactions got paid to by the same user, right? Quite ridiculous. And even like each of these outputs can have completely arbitrary values. Like they can be whatever you want, but there's no cryptographic link between the inputs and the outputs in the coordination of this coin join. And that just gives us like a blank slate to do whatever the fuck we want with collaborating Bitcoin transactions. And that has such a bright future ahead.
Interesting. So where, because that's not technically a base layer or a second layer solution. That's how would you categorize that as a privacy? Like, would you call it just a client side solution for privacy, or like?
Yeah, it's basically a client-side solution for privacy, and
Mm.
mainly just a solution for privacy based on how you build your Bitcoin transaction. Right? You can be very naive with building your Bitcoin transaction, very lonely, all by yourself, right? Clustering all your inputs that everyone knows that they're owned by the same person, and exactly knowing where you spent the coins on in the future and where you received them in the past, right? So like that's the easy, the naive, the super simple to do, something we could do like 10 years ago, right? But basically a coin join is like the next level of that. We can coordinate a transaction with hundreds of users trustlessly that nobody can steal and that nobody can spy on each other, right? And all of a sudden, if we have like a Bitcoin transactions with 500 users, right, spending like, I don't know, 700 inputs and creating 500
Yeah,
outputs,
good luck trying to
who will
untangle that. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Exactly. But I mean, there's one thing here. Like the Wabi-Sabi cryptography fixes the coordination, right, of how do we talk to each other to build this gigantic collaborative transaction. But there's more nuance here, right? Let's say if you have 100 inputs and like 100 outputs, right? 99 of these inputs are like between the value 0.5 and 1 Bitcoin, right? But then you have this one gigantic input worth of 100 Bitcoin, right? And on the output side, again, you have like 99 outputs worth roughly 0.5, 0.1 to 1 Bitcoin, right? But then you have this output worth 100 Bitcoin again, right? And obviously, you can link that this one person put 100 Bitcoin in and got 100 Bitcoin out. Right? That's very easy to figure out just by looking at the blockchain data, right? So we still have to pay attention, especially when we want to make a privacy-focused transaction, that the value of the inputs and the value of the outputs are set up in such a way that it makes it especially difficult to find out which input paid which output. And there are many ways to do that. I mean, the easiest way is just by having exactly the same amount, right? So if everyone has exactly 1 Bitcoin in, 1 Bitcoin out, right? I mean, there's no way that you could mathematically link any one of these to the other just based on number theory. But there are other nice ways to do that, like, for example, Knapsack, which I don't even want to get into now, that kind of basically depends on like your value of the output depends on the value of the other user's outputs, something like that, or inputs. So, and this is somewhat of a mix that we will be using in the Wabi-Sabi coin joins that we will run with Wasabi 2.0. It's like a mix of standard amounts. So where like a small group of users have exactly the same amount of Bitcoin in their outputs, which provides like provable privacy and like provably difficult to break, but also enabling like custom amounts, just for saving on block space or even for making payments. So yeah, these are like some of the things that we can do now. But it's still a lot of difficult nuances to be figured out with the amount organization.
Crazy, man. When people say, "Oh, there's no development happening on Bitcoin," it's laughable. Like we're literally building, we're at the cutting edge. It's wild. Okay. So we've spoken philosophy, we've spoken some practicality. Is there anything else, any other threads you want to pull on in between these two worlds?
Well, I think maybe like the very interesting thing is to put all the nice privacy technology that we have worked on in the past and to find interesting ways to putting them together. Like, for example, like coin swaps are fascinating. Like to swap the ownership of an on-chain UTXO with someone else is genius. And we see that with the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is a coin swap implementation, basically. And it has great privacy potential, although I would say that currently a lot of that potential is not yet reached. Like there are some serious privacy fuck-ups in Lightning, but we have ways to fix them. And it will get a lot better with things like Taproot, for example. All of a sudden, with Taproot, your on-chain footprint of a Lightning network, in the cooperative case, looks indistinguishable from a single signature user, right? So that's a massive, massive win for the on-chain privacy of Lightning. And we can go even further with that. I mean, just imagine, man, like a Wasabi type coin join coordinated amongst hundreds of Taproot users, right? Where we spend like many, many hundreds of inputs and generate many, many hundreds of outputs. Everything looks like a single SIG and a single public key, right? But under the hood, what's going on is like people setting up advanced inheritance schemes that where potentially like their heirs might spend Bitcoin, and some are opening a Lightning Network channel directly inside the coin join. Right? We can like Schnorr some weird ring signature magic that with Lightning Network you don't even have to reveal which of the coins you actually own. Like there is just such a vast, crazy amount of design space that we can use inside the Bitcoin network with all these many small parts that we have. It's kind of like the philosophy of wabi-sabi itself. I mean, we didn't come up with the name. This is an Asian philosophy of finding beauty in broken things. And I think the name is so fitting, right? Because like Bitcoin privacy is kind of broken. I mean, seriously, like it's not where it should be, far from it. And especially the way that we use it today is just disrespectful. And we can do a lot better. So what we try to achieve with Wasabi and kind of what our vision is that we will take all these broken pieces, put them together into a beautiful shape of the vase that it was before, and then fill the cracks with gold. Right? To create beauty out of broken things, right? To put things together in a nice, intuitive way that just works, right? And I think that type of mindset has a phenomenal potential in terms of Bitcoin privacy, usability, scaling, right? Sure, it's broken on all fronts. Like Bitcoin sucks if you look at it closely, right? But we have many kind of genius, intuitive ways of how we can use the kind of broken technology at our disposal to still, nevertheless, build something utmost beautiful, as private, scalable, and intuitive to use. And like with that type of vision, I can really see Bitcoin succeed in the long run.
Very eloquently put. I mean, I guess broken is maybe a strong word, at least for me. I think if Bitcoin only solved the problem of not being able to corrupt the money supply, and this is sort of where we stopped, I think it's a huge win. But yeah, like I think maybe to augment what you said there is that with this approach, I think the word you mentioned earlier was design space, is that like this has the capacity to do things based on the strength of the Bitcoin's digital primitives that we could not do with anything else with any degree of assurity or I guess security. Like Bitcoin is that foundation. We can do all of this stuff now because those ingredients are actually there. And I guess this is part of staying vigilant. This is part of continuing to push the envelope, but thinking about which envelope we're pushing and not just fucking willy-nilly, like whether you're Ethereum or any of these other idiots, and just willy-nilly changing everything at the base layer. It's just so stupid. Whereas this approach is far more, I guess, deep and well thought through, and yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and just things like multi-signature are such a like mind-bogglingly invention. Like I am just flabbergasted that humans came up with that shit. Like ridiculous. Like this is, I even wrote a bachelor thesis on this. Like this is non-simulated shared ownership of a scarce asset. Like that is so ridiculous. Like what does that mean? So we have a scarce asset, right? Like a T-shirt, right? Either you wear it or I wear it. Like a gold coin, either you hold it or I hold it. Like a Bitcoin UTXO, right? It's either yours or it's mine, and either you can spend it or I can spend it, right? So there's a potential of conflict over who can control these scarce resources, right? As we spoke about earlier. And the way that we solve that is with property rights, right? With clear definitions of who can spend what, right? But the thing is that so far, these were somewhat simulated constructs, right? You had a piece of paper that said you own this house. Well, but someone just comes in and knocks in the door and screams at you and chases you out with guns. Well, it's no longer yours, right? You can no longer really use it. So property rights kind of fail to actually defend the property, right? And with Bitcoin, we have like this way to cryptographically like enforce the property. Like a Bitcoin, like no single Bitcoin UTXO, no single Bitcoin was ever stolen. Not once, not one time, right? That's so crazy, right? Every Bitcoin, every unspent transaction output has a script that absolutely clearly defines mathematically under which conditions this coin can be spent again, right? For example, the script says, here's a public key, right? And this coin can only be spent if someone provides a signature that is valid to this public key. Like, that was the definition of who can spend it. And there's fucking no way to spend this unless you fulfill the definition, unless you provide a valid signature. Like, there's just no way. It has never happened before. And this is so ridiculous. I mean, just alone to have this on the individual scale, right? That one individual can own this property in a way that it's just mathematically fucking impossible that anyone can take it from him, that anyone can spend it in a different way that is not according to the will specified in the Bitcoin script itself. But it goes even more crazy with multi-signatures, because all of a sudden we can define a contract that multiple spending conditions have to be fulfilled, right? A signature from both this public key and the other public key, right? And all of a sudden we have this construct where we can together, like two people, control this asset, actually own the asset in a way that it is impossible for them to spend unless they agree and put their signatures voluntarily on the transaction. Like, this is such a mind-blowing concept that we figured out how to manifest property rights in cryptography in a way that it's just unbreakable. This is such a powerful machine.
Dude, it's wild. It is literally the thing that gets, like I said, through the great filter. This is why I'm just so adamant that it's the most important invention of humankind. Anyway, I can't add anything to what you just said other than I agree. It's a beautiful thing. So look, we've done a marathon here. Is there any final thoughts that you want to add other than that eloquent piece you just put forward then?
Well, I guess, always a final note is act, like become active, like think for yourself, right? And act upon what you come to understand. That's like the general advice that goes always, right? And I've been doing a lot of thinking recently on like how to get people to actually do that, right? And I think in the Bitcoin space, we've done a phenomenal job with creating content and sharing that content. Like over the last years, so many fabulous minds have started to speak up, right? And to voice their opinions and to share their opinions with others. This has just advanced the general understanding of Bitcoin by so many individuals to an unspeakable extent. Like, this is such great work. I mean, like, seriously, well done. But for me, always this, like, content accumulation is always only the first step. Like, sure, it's great that you listen to all the Bitcoin podcasts, right? But are you actually thinking about the topics, right? Are you actually for yourself coming up with interesting solutions to these problems, right? And are you for yourself thinking of how to improve the situation, right? Like that's the first thing, like to get you to think. And the question is how to do that. And I think it is with somewhat forcing actions, or with making the situation very uncomfortable, so that action becomes required, right? Because thought always comes before action, right? You're gonna have to think about it before you act, always. That's just how humans work.
I don't know about some humans. I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, maybe they ought to work at least the way that I like to think about it.
Sorry, continue. I cut you off there.
So yeah, but and this is like one of the methods of learning that I've come to love in my like seeking for understanding of economics and praxeology and Austrian economics, and this is the Socratic method. Like that's basically, well, it's a way to have a good conversation, right? And to find interesting questions, right? And to think about the question and to question the question, first of all, if that is even addressing a problem that is meaningful, right? Or is this actually a condensed articulation of a question that will lead us to discovering the solution to a problem, right? And then once we found a good question, well, to actually think about it, right? And to propose different solutions to that question, and to think which one is like accurate, right? And a truthful depictions of how things are, or at least getting there. So like I learned that with in economics with the Mises-Kreis, like the Mises Circle, which was like this ancient seminar that Ludwig von Mises did in Vienna. Every Friday, just getting together in a room and talking about all things in economics, right? And asking each other questions and like really like thinking about this stuff, like for hours and hours and hours until late night at the bar, right? And I just love that method of conversing to foster a serious conversation that's actually meaningful. And I've been organizing a lot of these Socratics all over the place, but now recently I'm actually like I've built basically a like my own lecture room or university room to hold specifically these Socratic seminars at towardsliberty.com. Yeah, so it's like it's I think something that is a bit missing, or that was underdeveloped in the educational effort so far. Again, awesome job on content creation, but really getting people involved to think for themselves, right? That is kind of the next step that we somehow have to figure out to provide at scale.
Interesting. I guess, have you found that more difficult in a world of these crazy social distancing rules and all this sort of stuff? Like,
yeah, I think so. Like, there's nothing like a good meet space conversation, right? Where you can look each other in the eye and shake hands and, converse on many more layers than just a verbal or even visual, right? So, yeah, that's for sure a hindrance in communication. I mean, it's a massive one at that, right? So, but I mean, that's why we built cyberspace, to converse and to share our ideas, even when we're not together in meet space. And I mean, that's awesome. Like, it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just that it's a bit different, but it has the massive upside of being able to talk to anyone. I mean, we're talking right now, just sitting across the globe, right? We could not have had this awesome conversation over the last 3 hours, right, without this type of technology. And yes, we missed out on the interpersonal, face-to-face, like real human interaction in meet space. But well, at least we shared our ideas, right? And hopefully learned something from it and advanced our understanding of how things are. So we still get a lot of the benefits. But again, like the challenge is that it's so easy to just consume the content, right? To get stuck watching Netflix playlists or like YouTube playlists or podcasts just on repeat, not even thinking about the stuff that is being said, but just accumulating it, right? Just like being blasted with it. That is super easy in cyberspace, right? Because there's just an infinite ocean of information.
yeah,
right?
yeah. It's the interaction, the level of interaction is much lower, and that's why you need the back and forth. I guess action reaction is something that happens across all dimensions and across all layers of existence, and I think that's that is a real difficulty in cyberspace. But I guess maybe a point to make there is that, you know, whoever's listening to this, is if you've got people around you, friends, family, and everything, is like, have these discussions, open them up, fucking think, and you know, maybe, because I'm guilty of this as well. Sometimes just being so sick and tired of being surrounded by idiots that I just sort of get lost in, you know, my audiobooks, or get lost in reading, or get lost in these things, because you just don't want to be subject to that crap. But the dialogue must continue, and specifically it must be a dialogue, or a multi-log, not just a you know, monologue.
Yes, like fundamentally I agree, but I still think that thinking critically by yourself is a very meaningful exercise, right? I mean, just contemplating things in your own head, like writing stuff down in the diary, for example, extremely powerful, right? Because again, it forces you to act, like consciously make choices in how you articulate your thoughts. Right, that is what critical thinking is about, and stuff like journaling. Right, it's not just the mind stream that you have, like the monkey brain that is just chatting on constantly. You actually have to pick out of that unlimited potential concrete actions, concrete words, and that aspect in and of itself is already useful. But of course, where other people come in is kind of the peer review. Right, you can put out a point, and they can share their point of view on that argument, right? And see if it's a good argument or a bad argument, if it's truthful or not, right? And this interaction, right, will give you new input to think about, right? You will always need new input. Like, you cannot discover anything like completely isolated. Like, there's always external input that starts the thinking process, right? So getting really fresh input from another person is much easier than trying to come up with fresh content all by yourself. Right? It's possible just based on critical thinking, but much more difficult than if someone else expresses a point of view.
I agree. I was going to use the Matt Ridley term. Is sort of like the ideas having sex. It's like, you know, these things come together, but absolutely. All right, my man. Well, look, thank you very much for this discussion, and for reaching out, for coming on. I think we've covered so much ground, both philosophically, and also from an actual practical standpoint, that people can see that it's not just, you know, Bitcoiners, you know, maybe this is a good way to sign it off, is cypherpunks don't just act, but we think before we act. And, you know, Bitcoiners are a great manifestation of that. Is, you know, we philosophize and, you know, pontificate and everything like that, but we also do stuff along the way. And you know, if anyone's going to inherit the world, it's going to be the Bitcoiners, the men and women of action. And I think maybe to close this off, you can tell the listeners and everyone, you know, what your surname actually means, because that, I think, is a great mental image for the kind of warriors that Bitcoiners are, and it fucking perfectly suits you.
Yeah, so Hillebrand is a old Germanic name, and has many variants in today. But the root are two Germanic words, Hille, which is the sword, and Brand, which is fire. So this is literally the fiery sword. And in the tradition of the name, like, this name was granted to the Germanic warrior who went into battle courageously, right, and fought for, well, I guess, what is right, and what he deemed meaningful, and who acted, right, who took his sword and did stuff. So that's at least how I like to think about the name, and it's I like it. I think it's a good one, and as you say, like, we have many heroes in Bitcoin that deserve such a name, who actually go out courageously and act. I mean, you're for sure one of them.
Thank you.
uh, so now, like, I'm honored to have such a strong tribe of peers around me that have principles, that can think critically and that have the courage to do so and to act creatively and in unexpected ways. Like it's really it's an honor to have you by my side. Like this whole fight would be not worth it if not for the strong communities that we can build in fighting
Absolutely.
this utmost evil. So it's something that really brings people together. And honestly, I mean, the Bitcoin tribe is just, yeah, it's outstanding. So it's really a massive honor and pleasure to share this humongous work that we have to do, and that we are doing. Like it's a great burden and a great responsibility, but well, with peers like this, it's also a hell of fun.
It is, my man. It is. All right, brother. Thank you very much. We're signing off, and I'll see everyone on the next episode.